again into this 45-minute panel webinar to talk all about stewardship and donor retention. Like I said, my name is Cristaldi, and I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Virtuous, but I am just very thrilled to welcome to our so-called virtual stage a couple of my fabulous colleagues from our partner at Gravyty, and of course, the lovely Marne Fauser, the CEO and President of United Way of Central Illinois. Y'all, welcome to our webinar today. If you just want to hop on for a second and give us a little detail about yourselves. Marne, we could start with you, madam.
All right. Hi, I'm Marne. I'm the President and CEO of United Way of Central Illinois. I've been in this role for a little bit over a year, and I just absolutely love it and love working with the community and really focusing on engaging our donors.
That's awesome. And then we have Mr. Erik Tomalis, which if you have joined us on a Virtuous webinar before, you will know that he is the self-imposed mayor of Pittsburgh. Sir? Of course we had to call it out. We know that at some point we were going to reference Pittsburgh.
I have hit the marketing peak of I don't bring up Pittsburgh anymore. I have other people bringing it up, and I think that's fantastic. Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. I am coming from actually sunny Pittsburgh. As you know, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm on the road a lot representing Virtuous, but I'm home today, so I'm real excited. I am a recovering fundraiser. I've been for the last 20 years. I now have the opportunity to serve on Virtuous and talk a little bit about responsive fundraising, but I am a big believer in donor retention and stewardship. So I'm real excited to jump into this conversation with Marne and Frank. Frank's got a great platform to be able to showcase that. This is where you go off mute, Frank.
Yeah, I know. I was just, it's Thursday. Yeah. So I'm here. I'm Frank with Gravyty, and same as Erik, my background's fundraising. Marne and I actually worked at a similar organization together in the same territory. So I've known Marne for a while here as well. So super excited to be here with her. Prior to me working at Gravyty, I was a major gift officer at Greater Twin Cities United Way. So another great connection there as well. And I'm in Minnesota, and it's like low 70s here. This is like the best time of year for us before it gets too hot or too cold. And super excited to also chat about stewardship, donor retention, something I'm extremely passionate about. And yeah, and like Erik, I spent last month traveling a lot, but not as much as he has the last 5 months. So excited to be here and be at home.
Yeah, we are so excited to have all three of you join us today. And even more so, I think this conversation is going to be really timely about stewardship and donor retention because of the ever-changing economic factors that are going on right now. This is now more time than ever to actually really lean into stewardship for retaining your donors, so we don't see that loss year over year, which we will most certainly get into some fun stats and how to be the cream at the top, really, as your nonprofit really stewards your donors. But I do want to really quickly share our agenda for today's session, so we have an idea. What are we talking about? Where are we going? First and foremost, we're going to talk about today's state of generosity. What is going on in today's world, and how are our donors responding to the state of generosity? We're also going to be sharing some really great tips and tricks on how to steward and grow your donor relationships with automation. So of course, bringing a little bit of technology to see how it can help your organization. Automation is honestly one of my favorite things. I think it's a really underutilized tool that can really empower how we communicate and personalize and grow our donor base. Some actual takeaways. I love a webinar that gives me the 1, 2, 3s on how to actually start implementing this in my own org. And then lastly, we will, of course, answer your questions. But I do want to say, please don't wait until the end of today's session to ask any questions. We want to make this a very collaborative environment. So if there are any questions that may pop up during today's session, just drop them in the little chat bubble there. We will certainly answer them as we go along. But to kick us off for today's session, we actually have a question for you. And in the chat, if you want to drop your response there, what is the biggest issue or obstacle your organization is facing? And Marne, I'm actually going to kick this over to you. What is it currently like at United Way right now? What are some of the bigger issues or obstacles your org is facing when it comes to donor retention and stewardship?
Well, for United Way, it's a little bit different because our bread and butter has always been employee giving campaigns. And so there's a lot of workplace campaigns, but as you know, looking across the country, the workplace has changed. There's a lot of us that are working remotely. So you could be working for some place that's headquartered in Pittsburgh, but you actually live in Nevada. So I think that's definitely a challenge for United Way, because we really have to look at how do we diversify our revenue, and how do we start having those one-on-one conversations with donors. And you talk about major gifts, mid-level giving, planned giving, first-time donors, just the acquisition piece. So I think just having an overall more versatile donor engagement plan is critical for United Ways.
I think that's a great point. Haven't seen anybody coming through the chat yet, which y'all, surely there is something
There's
happening
something.
that you would love to talk about.
Well, and being out on the road and like talking to a lot of thought leaders and nonprofit leaders, what I'm seeing is kind of what Marnie's leading into, is that I talked to someone last week and they shared with me that they have, this is a terrible problem to have, but it's truth, is they have too many major donors. They have individuals giving at 105, in large gifts, but they don't have enough $20 and $50 and $100 donors that can be able to replace them. So they're trying to figure out what that stewardship plan is to be able to retain these groups, to be able to push up the funnel.
Wow. I mean, you would think that's a great problem to have, right? You have so many major donors, you just don't know what to do with them. But you're right, it's those mid-level donors, there's newer donors where they're donating consistently, that $25, that $50 amount, that really is the lifeblood for many organizations. And I'm seeing a couple comments here of connecting with new donors. Well, guess what? You're at the right webinar then, if that is your biggest obstacle. I do have another question for our folks today too, that we can chat about, which is, how is your organization retaining staff and creating a collaborative environment? Of course, we're really trying to focus on donor stewardship here, but a lot of that too really does rely on your staff and having an environment where you can manage that, where you can manage all those many major donors, but also bringing in new donors. I'd love to hear the panel's kind of thoughts on this question as well, as folks drop their answers into the chat.
I can chime in on this one. That is something I come across on a regular basis when I talk to individuals. Me, myself, as a past major gift officer, with staffing and staff turnover, staff retention, I think having the right systems, the right processes in place will help retain your staff and retain them at a higher rate, making your job easy. We'll go back to automation, but automation can help people have a better experience on their day-to-day. Those repetitive tasks are remedial, they're just not fun to do. And I think the other thing too is like what we run into and what we are up against with staff turnover. So I had a conversation with a donor. This was about 3 years ago. I had lunch with them. And they said that they had an organization who they've gone through 4 different gift officers who had reached out in over 2 years. And every single gift officer who had reached out to them said the exact same thing. Hey, wanted to know why you give to us. What's your story? All of that. And the donor confided in me and said, they already know that, or I've already told everyone that I'm done. I'm not giving to them anymore. And so it's just that ability to capture that info and then not have that staff turnover, because our donors, they're starting to see it and they feel it.
Well, and that just bothers me right there, Frank, because like I just immediately go to those 3 previous gift officers never put the notes in the system, because if it's not in the system, it doesn't exist. Marnie, I know you went off.
No, I mean, yeah, that actually hurts my heart. But I think when you look at staff turnover, you really got to look at leadership and what's happening. Obviously, there's opportunities for people to improve themselves and help them on their journey. But I think you have to have that solid culture in your environment. And, for us here, it is critical that we are responsible to one another. I'm not on a higher level just because of my title. Like, I'm responsible to my staff. We're responsible for each other. So the fundraising doesn't just land on the development. Our program people are involved. There's goals, internal goals that we have to support one another. So you may have a great year, Erik. You may pull in, $2.5 million as a fundraiser. But if our programs aren't doing what they need to be doing, we have to have that responsibility to each other. And I think just really developing that culture and making it donor centric. Sometimes fundraisers leave because you're like, oh, you have to hit a 1.5 million portfolio or whatever it is. And you're like, well, how do I get there? You just can't have abstract numbers. You really have to be donor centric in your approach.
It is so true.
Well, and that's right there, Marnie, that's the piece that like jumps out at me is, and if you've seen me speak and everything else, I get on this small little pulpit where I am a big believer that donor retention equals staff retention. And because it's all the relationships that Marnie and Frank are talking about. And yet as organizations, we only look at year over year budgets. We say, hey, we have a $1.5 million number. This is what you need to raise for this year, yada, yada, yada. And next year, something else happens, right? And we should be looking at 36 months or rolling 36-month average. We should be looking at 3-year averages as a business, because that's what businesses do. They have a strategic plan, but it's just hard to retain those staff and that turnover there.
I think I would also add to Frank what he was saying about the fundraiser goes to the donor and says, hey, tell me why you give. Like, if you're a new fundraiser or you're replacing someone, flip the script and say, hey, I'm new. What should I need to know about X? Flip it to you are asking them for advice, not asking them to repeat something 5, 6, 7, 8 times, because that is a turnoff to a donor because you feel like you've never been heard by the organization. So I would say flip the script and ask for advice on that, what you need to know.
Those are all excellent points. And, Erik, I know before we started today's session, you had mentioned that the Generosity Commission had just released their report. I know that we're about to dive into the generosity crisis. I'm actually going to pitch that over to you because these are some pretty interesting stats, I would say, when it comes to how we are actually losing our donors. So we've been talking a lot about that in the last several minutes. So I'd love for you just to kind of walk us through why we're starting to see, aside from the conversations we've been having, why donors are continuing to opt out from organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's so many, there's a great question here is what are some books, podcasts, resources out there? Simon Sinek's a great one. I mean, there's a whole host. The Veritas Group is a great one that Frank just referenced. The book I'm going to reference is Nathan Chappell and Brian Crimmins put together a book all about this generosity crisis. And it's really it's a really depressing thing that's going on in the nonprofit industry when you start looking at it is, we seeing 50% of donors are turning over year over year and they're opting out. And this is straight from the Giving USA and the Lilly School of Philanthropy. And they're opting out mainly because from this report from Dr. Adrian Sargent is the fact that we're getting that inappropriate ask, impersonal messaging, lacking the acknowledgement, lacking the transparency. You might be hearing this from your donors already. I've talked to a guy last week where he was talking about how he gave $9,000 over a 5-year period to an organization, but now it's not much, right? It's not a big gift, but it's big to him, where now he's giving somewhere else. Because they didn't, every time they called him, it was always when they were asking for a gift. They weren't cultivating, they weren't stewarding, they weren't saying thank you. They weren't asking the question that Marnie just posed of why is it important for other donors to contribute? And I think that personal touch is really what our donors are looking for. They're seeing it out there in Netflix and they're seeing Amazon, they're seeing all that personal communication that's happening in the for-profit space. But our sector is slow to adopt it. And there's another slide here, Kelly, which I love because I went to the Lilly School and I value what Dean Una does, is donors not only want to understand the impact of their gifts, but value those organizations that intentionally foster meaningful relationships with their donors. It's important. People like this Generosity Commission that Kelly just referenced about 45 minutes ago, they put out a 71-page report on what generosity really matters. And I haven't been able to dig deep into it, but it's really the key thing I saw at the top of the report in the executive summary was people are giving based on their feeling, and they want to be generous, and it's personal to them. And so when we're not being that personal communicator and thanking in an appropriate manner, donors are leaving us, and it's not a good spot to be in as an industry.
It's absolutely not. And Marty, I'd actually love to know too, from United Way's perspective, how are y'all trying to really foster those meaningful relationships so we don't see that 50% attrition rate year over year?
I think the number one thing for me is being authentic. And obviously, if a donor is donating, they're trying to help you solve a problem. And they're saying, like, I may not be able to be at the front lines, but I want to help solve the problem. So I think even addressing it not as like, would you make a gift? Would you help us solve this problem? And then all the pieces, the automation that you can use through the CRM to be able to connect using video. So teeing up Erik and Frank a little bit, but just being authentic. And I'm going to just show this. I'm going to just put it in front of my camera. You can see that real quick, but that is just a card. And it was some of our volunteers, some of our board members at one of our events. And our thank you cards are those pictures that were taken, and we do handwritten notes. That is that touch point to help develop a relationship. Is that the meaningful connection? We probably didn't drive it closer, but you are also being authentic and care about them. So when you sit down, you've developed that trust and say, okay, now we need to solve this problem. And here it's going to take X amount of dollars, $25,000, $10,000. But you have that plan, that 12 months up to 3 years, that plan that you're going to work with that donor. That's critical.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, that postcard, I remember we were talking, like, as we were beginning kind of to talk about today's webinar a few weeks back, like seeing that postcard and how it has resonated with y'all's donors. I think you had said something like many of them go and put it on like their bulletin boards in their offices. Like they're so excited to get that piece from y'all, which is great. And it's so simple at the heart of it too, which is so great. And it's really authentic. Oftentimes I feel like, even as my own experience as a fundraiser, we had to do something really elaborate. We had to like really showcase, like throw them basically a parade for, a donation, which yes, we like want to celebrate these moments, but the ones that resonated the best with us was when we sent them like quick video, a handwritten note, like a picture attached to an email of like, hey, thank you so much. This was us at the event together. And those are the ones where our donors repeatedly kept coming back to us, which was awesome. To kind of set the stage too, this is an appropriate segue is, Frank, I'd love for you to talk to us about the simple rules of donor stewardship. If we are going to move more into this pathway of really stewarding our donors, I feel like there's some ground rules before we really get into it.
Yeah, I love it. So before we jump into here, talking about personalized and being authentic, I worked with in the Twin Cities, I worked with a couple organizations. They, produce milk. I'm not going to say who they are. They have recipe websites, and I used to make cookies for my individual donors with my son, and we would hand deliver cookies once a year from the recipes from their website. And it's just those are the things where it has nothing really to do with your organization, but it has everything to do with the thank you, with the generosity, and being mindful and thoughtful of who that end recipient is. I just fun ideas, but talking about like make communication more personal. So if you did not know this stuff, this gets me really excited. But 44% of donors would give 10% more. And then millennials, 62% would give more if their communication and how you communicated with them was personalized. There's varying levels of personalization, but personalize whatever you're able to do. And like we all have tasks that are going on. I read the book 4 Hour Work Week by Trevor Ferris. Everyone has these things. And are you busy being busy, or are you busy working on the things that actually matter and the things that move the relationship forward? I had a standing agreement with a previous boss that if the meeting had nothing to do with my job of moving the relationship forward, stewarding gifts and saying thank you, I didn't have to show up to the meeting. And so it's really setting the stage for how we communicate and where we need to focus our time. It's not just a task, it's a whole process. It's a long game play. Maybe that gift comes in annually, maybe it doesn't, but it's something beyond that. It's something down the road. And then the other bullet point here, it is important to thank donors and communicate their impact so they feel appreciated and compelled to give again. And a good example is I was inspired to make a gift, and I literally got a personalized video. And so there's teeing up for whatever else you want to talk about. But I sent a gift in. They were having a giving day. I got a video back from them within like 5 minutes. And they were just like, oh my gosh, Frank, I can't believe you sent us a gift. So cool. I was like so pumped that they sent me the video. I turned around and made another gift to their campaign. It wasn't like a huge gift, but it was so cool to get that, and the feeling and that emotion that they actually saw it. I think, that's another problem is people don't even feel like they've been seen, or that someone saw their gift, that they saw it come in. And even acknowledging that fact on the most basic personal human level is extremely important and very compelling to retain those donors.
To your point though, Frank, one of my favorite, I support a lot of nonprofits here in our community. And there's one that's really close to my heart that's here locally. And I'm really not, I'm going to go on a stage here, is I'm not a big fan of Giving Tuesday, because I really feel like it's like the nonprofit Hunger Games where we're all fighting and trying to just put all out there. But like this organization here locally that I support, they had their students call to give thanks. And the immediate first thing they said on the phone call was, I'm not going to ask you for money. I just want to tell you how much your gift made my, career path. And it's an independent school for lower income kids. It's just so cool to be able to do that. And I think we get in our heads of thinking giving is all about giving, but it's also about sharing and telling that story and saying thank you and giving thanks. So yeah.
Yeah, there is a deep power in generosity.
Mm-hmm.
I would absolutely love it if a student called me just to say thank you for the gift, instead of the reverse of continuing to ask for further contributions. That's so impactful. I think I would just be floating on cloud nine the rest of the day of like, I had a really sweet kid, like call me. That's amazing.
Well, you know what I did right afterward? I made a donation. I went online and gave another $100. I was like, there was no ask.
Absolutely.
Now I know Erik and Frank's 2 secrets. So watch out. Here we come.
Yes. Send a video and have a really sweet child call and say thank you. But for you, Marne, I'd love to know if you'd be willing to share, how is your team leaning more into these kind of rules for donor stewardship? How are you leveraging certain like tools or ways to make sure that communication is personalized? I think a lot of times when I talk to members of our community, even customers of Virtuous, that they're like, yeah, like being personal is great, but how do I get started? It seems really daunting. What are some of the simple ways that you can make that just an easier process?
So first of all, I think you have to have a CRM. So we have Virtuous, but you have to have a CRM that works for you, and it has to understand the fundraising side. If it only understands the financial side, then it's very transactional, and you don't want transactional, you want transformational. So I think having a CRM that works for you, that you can set up those donor journeys that all of your team is a part of, I think that's number one. The second piece is, I am going to shout out to Frank too, just with Gratavid, is because I think having a platform to use those videos, be able to send out to donors, you can set those up. We include our board members in those. Like, that is just a way to expand your team. Like, we have a small team here, but expand your team and use the gifts and the talents of your board. So being able to have a board member say thank you, that's peer-to-peer right there. And so including our board members and using those 2 platforms, I think is really important. And then number 1, ask the donor, how do you want to be communicated with? How do you want to hear from us? And if they are somebody that likes text messaging, then you need to honor that. So I think it's, you're always asking the question and leaning into that.
Marne, when I was at the Boy Scouts, I had I love the board thanking piece. And I had a rotation every week. It was a different board member. So every board got an idea of the culture of philanthropy of saying thank you. But there is an asterisk that if a donation came from their community, that board member got to be able to say thank you. But it was just a rotation that everybody was able to do it.
Yep. And that's similar. We had that set up where our board will thank, but we have our board go through the list. And if there are people that they know, they kind of, they'll kind of put their name. And so it does rotate that way.
Susan just dropped a really great question, by the way, in the chat is how do you ask the donor? Are we using user surveys? What is the typical response to surveys like this? And I think that's a fabulous question. And I'd like to open that up to the panel to discuss.
Marne, you jump in first, and then I have a response as well.
Okay, well, as far as donor surveys,
So the question is, how do you ask the donor like how they want to be communicated with?
oh, I just asked that question. I think it's on a call or when I'm meeting, I just say, you always want next steps. So when you're meeting with a donor, you don't want to leave it like, oh, like who's taking the next step? Are you gonna call me? It's kind of like dating, right? Are you gonna call me? Should I text them? What's going on? You always say like, when would be a good time to follow up with you? So it's the same thing, like, how do you want to be updated on how your gift is making a difference? And if they say, you know what, I'm super busy, I love to get a text here and there, or, they may say, once a year, if I just received the annual report, I think you just ask the question. Now, we do have a survey, literally short, 5 questions real quick, and we would ask them and we could send that via email. We actually tied it into a video that we sent, like, hey, thank you so much for your gift. We look forward to getting to know you a little more. Could you take this quick survey? So we use that through a Gratavid platform as well. So I think there's different ways depending on, is this a major gift donor or mid-level donor that's on a portfolio? Is it a donor that maybe lapsed, or is it someone that you just haven't been able to connect with?
Yeah, and I've done surveying as well. And yeah, beyond just that, it's how they communicate back with you. Are they sending an email? Are they sending stuff in via mail? And then utilizing that. But like to text message, in the Giving USA report, there's some other data that came out from it. All generations are more receptive to monthly texts from nonprofits, with 45% welcoming them. And then like on the Gratavid video engagement side, we have some partners who are sending texts out, and they're seeing 90+% click-through rates on a text. Now, industry average is about 90% open rate on text message. So if you aren't in the text message space, also ask for people's cell phones when you're doing these surveys, and then let them know that you will be texting them and sharing updates. Who doesn't want a text saying like, hey, look at what we're able to accomplish? And especially with the change in generations, with Gen Z, email is business, text is more personal. And if that's where the relationships are going, that's something to be cognizant of.
I'm a loyal supporter of St. Jude, and we all know who St. Jude is. They do text messages and at the next level, obviously, but it's like we all want to aspire to, do something to that level of nonprofit. They actually put a picture of a bald and brave kid on the front with a small little snippet of a story and the link directly to the website with the longer version of that story. And I'm a monthly donor, part of their Partner in Hope program, but it's like that is stewardship component. It pulls on my heart every time I see that picture of that young child going through whatever it might be. But we have tools at our disposal to do that. It's just figuring out, like you said earlier, Frank, just start. Just you be authentic, be who yourself, but do something, and that's where we want to get to. But just to start crawling and walking before we get there.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. And I think this next slide really speaks well to that as well, which is, with all of these different ways that we're discussing about giving, those prompt and personal thank yous really being expressive in our generosity. 93% of donors, and Frank, you had kind of expressed this earlier, would actually give to a charity, to a nonprofit. Again, that's incredible. Like we've shared a couple examples here today of like, Erik's example. I had a student call and thank me, turned around and said, you know what, I'm going to make another donation. Frank, you also shared that same experience. You got a really great video that was super exciting, and you could really tell like how meaningful that donation was. Turn around, let's make another one. It's those little touch points where people feel heard, they feel seen, they feel listened to, they feel that expression of joy. As opposed to, I've even had an experience where I've made a donation to an organization here where I live locally in Charleston, South Carolina. I never heard a word back, y'all. I didn't get an email, a letter, anything thanking me. And you know what? I don't donate to that organization now because I felt very unheard as a donor, which is really sad. And I know that's a common occurrence that I'm hoping will change over the coming years too. But I'd love to, if there is anything else we can unpack here as well.
The two words, prompt and personal. I mean, prompt, if you've ever communicated with anyone and say someone emails you, if you email them right back, it's almost like you're having a two-way engaging conversation. And then like Dr. Jen Shing says, the people pay the most attention to the thank you communication. And so if you're able to leverage that they made a gift and then use that to really launch that relationship forward. When I worked for the Salvation Army, I remember hammering the phones. I still call, but I was hammering the phones then, and I was able to qualify a portfolio of 300 people to 150 in under 6 months. And it was because I called all of them immediately after they made a gift. And they picked up the phone because number one, they wanted to know that I got the gift. And then number two, they wanted to hear what we're going to do with it. And then after that, that's when really you could start showing what we were doing with it. And so that promptness, it also made them want to pick up the phone. And then personalized, obviously I was calling them. So that was pretty personal. But I think those are the two biggest things, like from this quote, prompt what you can do to be as fast as possible, and then personal, how close you can get to them.
Yes. And I would add that part of that is you need help because you have a data team or you have somebody that's helping enter those gifts or, open those gifts that are coming in, making sure they're in the CRM, however your reporting is pulled. You have to work with your internal team because your data team, your finance team, whoever's handling it, they need to know how critical it is for that turnaround time. So they have to be part of that solution. They are part of your stewardship plan.
That's exactly it. And this leads into a really good poll question, by the way, that we're going to throw out to everybody is, well, we've been talking a lot about thanking donors. How are y'all currently thanking donors? So I'm going to throw this up for just a couple of seconds here so folks can answer, but would be interested to see what channels are y'all using? And there's so many nowadays too, which is really incredible. And we're getting a ton of really great results. Text, coincidentally, not ranking right now on the list. We're getting a lot of like phones, mailers, handwritten notes, firm handshake. Yes, that does work actually, especially when you're in person. And I know, Erik, you just threw that one in there to see. But I think this is an excellent kind of viewpoint too, and to the audience joining us today, that SMS is still underutilized. And granted, not everyone does want to receive text. I know that I hear kind of like a 50-50 response when I talk to folks about the leveraging of SMS, and some either love it and some are a little hesitant because they don't know how their donors are going to respond to it. But to Marnie's point, just simply ask your supporters, how do you want to be communicated with? We want to make sure that we're serving you in the best possible way. But a lot of y'all did say phone, which is fabulous. I hope you are all recruiting very lovely children to say thank you, because apparently that's how you get second donations. But yes, a lot of our traditional methods of those notes, mailers, and phone, which is awesome. Great. And then I know we've talked about this a little bit, and I just want to save a little bit of time here at the end of the session for some questions, because I know that we are getting some through right now. Just to kind of segue into some more of those questions, we have space for it. This is something we've been saying throughout the entirety of today's session. Be abundantly thankful. Be so grateful. Oftentimes, I remember when I was a fundraiser, and I'm sure y'all felt the same way. Many times our days were so busy, I forgot to be thankful, and I forgot to express my gratitude, not just to my donors, but to my team that I worked with, to say thank you for their hard work, being involved in like massive campaigns, especially capital campaigns when we were trying to build a new structure on our campus, things like that. Really, it's so simple. Sometimes I feel like we get into our minds that we must be elaborate, we must be over the top. donors expect the world from us, when really they just want to be felt in a really personal way that their donation matters. And it shows. I mean, we're seeing just really great results when we send something immediately and it's prompt and it's personalized. Anything that y'all would like to add here?
Well, the piece that you hit the nail on. Well, I'm going to go back to what Frank said earlier too about making that phone call. You want to make that initial phone call, but you don't want to do it like, hey, 10 seconds after they make a contribution, you call them and say, hey, I just got your gift. Thank you so much. There's a timing piece. You don't want to be creepy in it, but you want to be, to Marnie's point earlier, it's all about being authentic and being true to yourself. And so, and I'm going to lead in because Frank, I love your system and I love your solution. You can do it on your phone. It doesn't have to be a professional video thanking. You can just say, hey, I'm out there walking the dog, thought of you, what your impact is. And it's part of the experience. It's who you are. You're authentic and it's how you approach it. So just doing something in a raw form still matters. And the other piece I'll share is be abundantly thankful for, treating every donor like a major donor, because I started off this crisis. Don't treat all your $100,000 donors and give them all the thanks and all the kudos, but forget about your $5 and $20 and $50 donors. Those people matter. And it's going to grow generosity for your organization if you treat everybody like that major donor.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Even more so too, just a couple other stats to share around this. We've kind of talked a little bit about automation. I'm actually really thankful that we've been talking a lot about our shared experience as fundraisers of how we grow donor stewardship through the simple and powerful act of generosity. And through the different tactics and strategies that we've all implemented in our organizations. But I feel like I would be remiss too, because we have talked a tiny bit about automation. Marne did a great job talking about how they're leveraging the different technology platforms at their own organization. But when we talk about tasks too, we've hinted at this as well, that tasks can be repetitive. Sometimes are the most mind-numbing parts of our jobs. We're like, oh, I have this long to-do list to do. My goodness, my desk is covered in Post-it notes. Don't be afraid to see how technology can help you alleviate that, so you can actually go and steward those donors. If you were able to save, like this stat is saying, 6 hours a week through automation, imagine the personal visits you could accomplish with that 6 hours back, the phone calls that you could be making, the really quick videos that you could be sharing as well. I mean, there is just a wealth of ways that you can be, leveraging technology so you can really hyper focus on your donor stewardship. I would love to hear the panel's thoughts on this stat as well.
I'm going to defer to Marne to see how things are for.
I like how you guys just did that. Well, there's so many different ways that you can kind of set up those tasks. And I think it's prioritizing your workload, making it donor centric. So you're putting that donor first, and what are those pieces that you can automate. It's hard for me to say because I think there's so many different, are you on the annual fund? Are you the major gift? Are you the plan? Everybody's a little bit different. And so I'm going to throw this back to Erik and Frank if they have specifics, but I think you have to understand what role and what are you on the marketing side, what is your role and which pieces can you easily automate to, just make your week a little bit more donor centric and you're out face-to-face with donors.
Well, I'll share the practical. I'm a former face-to-face fundraiser. I've made a little over 4,000 face-to-face visits in my career. And in doing so, I had to make, if you do the math, probably about 20, maybe 30,000 phone calls to set those appointments up to be able to visit with these prospects that lead into donors, right? That was the thing I hated the most because you got hung up on all the time. You're, cold calling, if you will, your, warm leads in the organization. So what I would do is every morning between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, I would call yesterday's donors just to say thank you. And it got me personally, going back to your earlier point, Kelly, the question of how are you working with staff and how you're retaining staff and how do you keep everybody happy? I knew I was going to be in a good mood by saying thank you to yesterday's donors. And then at 9 to 11, I would get hung up on, why do you want to call? Why do you want to visit with me? Like all those things, but at least set my day in a good point of view. 90% of those phone calls were probably voicemail, because no one answers their phone anymore, but it was still, they got that message in an authentic way. I did that manually, but to have automation and have systems and technologies and the things that have grown, that was 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, it's amazing what you could do today. And to your point, Marnie, it's all about your persona inside your office.
And if you're an extrovert like Erik, I'm sure those morning phone calls are energizing for him versus
Right?
if you're an introvert, which I'm not. But if you are, maybe you want to wait till the afternoon so you can have some time to yourself to re-energize. And then like to automation, to that point, when you're looking to add solutions or looking to automate things, it's a matter of how does it connect with your current systems. No one ever wants to add something new that has no talkability, if that's a word, to each other. Like they should all connect. And that's like, obviously, one of the reasons we're all here is we partner together both on the video engagement and stewardship side, as well as on the CRM side. And those two do talk to each other, and they talk to each other in a meaningful way where if you're taking actions in one system, it should be recording in the other. Or if a gift comes in one system, you should be able to thank them via a video or automatically send a thank you video out based around whatever the gift was given to. And so that's really how automation saves you time, is you're not having to scour through data. You can set up rules and systems and processes. I've talked about that before, to make your life easier. You never want to add more work to your plate. And then I was jokingly going to say, since AI hasn't gotten brought up yet, because that's like everything on TikTok is about that. I guess maybe that's a logarithm on what I've been watching. But I was going to ask if you put that 71-page report and get it summarized through OpenAI yet, but it sounds like you didn't have the.
I'm not there yet, but I mean, it has an executive. I'm old school too. It's like, so it has an executive summary in it in the front page. So I'm going to read that first.
I love it. I do want to, like I said, leave time for some questions. And we've had, I feel like, just this really wonderful conversation. I hope others feel the same way. Wanted to at least share a couple of key takeaways before we dive into some questions. I've seen some really great comments come throughout today's session too, which is wonderful. A few key takeaways we've talked about today. Keep it simple, y'all. I think the old adage of KISS always works. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated. We don't need to do like these crazy overproduced ways to thank our donors, like the simple act of a phone call, of a video, of a text message that's prompt and it's personal. It does wonders for an organization. There is no need to do something crazy elaborate unless you'd like to. But really, stewardship does not have to be complicated. Thanking our donors certainly does not have to be. The power of generosity and just saying thank you goes an incredibly long way. Erik, I love that you used to call your donors first thing in the morning. I don't know. I'm very extroverted. I think I would be jazzed up if someone called me first thing. It was like, thank you so much. We love your donation. Would love to meet you. I'd be like, let's get coffee right now. Like, this will be great. But something like that really resonates with folks. Automation, like I said, we've talked a little bit today. It really can be your friend, and it can leverage those staff headaches, things like that. One, I think it was from RNS this past couple of weeks ago, Erik, we were talking about automation, and there is a bit of a fear that like automation is coming for like fundraisers jobs. And I'm here to tell you it is not. It's here to eliminate the tasks. It's here to eliminate the endless to-dos on your desk, things like that. And it really can be very helpful.
Well, and the thing that I like about automation, just to elaborate on that, Cal, is the idea of, think about automation. It's not robots are going to take over our jobs, if you will. It's this idea of what are we doing on the regular? What are we doing all the time? What can we automate? What can we be able to take off our plate? Because when we do that as fundraisers, because there's not enough of us in our nonprofit and the generosity crisis is going down, right? We can actually focus on impact and focus on new ideas and new concepts. So it's just trying to make us more efficient, really.
Yes, absolutely. And then, of course, I'm sure AI at some point is going to really play a role in reducing and simplifying those redundant tasks as well. Frank, I'm with you. I'm getting like a ton of stuff about AI right now, and I am just enamored with it. I'm so curious. And also, if anybody here knows our lovely VP of Branding, Stephen Boudreau, you should most certainly ask how he is working with ChatGPT to write an amazing fantasy novel, in which we are all riveted by on our team. But that just shows the power of AI right now. But also just to be incredibly and abundantly thank you. I think that's like the subtext to today's webinar. It's like the power of donor stewardship. Be abundantly thankful. That is like the takeaway from today's session. But any other key takeaways y'all would like to add in here before we jump into some questions?
I would just add, like, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to try something new and to set it up. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. Like, just reevaluate it and move on. But don't be afraid to just ask a donor outright how they want to be communicated. And if they're like, why are you asking me this? That doesn't mean the next 3 donors are going to respond that way. So it's okay. It's okay to fail.
Love that.
You always learn something when you fail. I have a lot, so I've learned a lot in my lifetime.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. We have had a couple of questions come in, and in the last little bit of our time, I'd love to have y'all answer these. But one question that I have seen come in is, how can I personally engage with a really large donor base? So we've kind of talked a lot about like the one-to-one connection point, but how can we actually engage with a much larger donor base? So say it's after a major campaign, it's after a Giving Tuesday type scenario. What are some tips and tricks around that?
I'll start and these guys can kind of follow up. I mean, I would just have that journey set up. Like if I was doing a capital campaign or a Giving Tuesday and those donors are coming in, I would have that journey set up to go ahead and automate to a large base. You can also use the video and already have it kind of pre-recorded with what you want to say, what you want your CEO to say, or a board chair or a client that has been served. You can kind of do that, and that kind of is that mass, that one-to-many solution, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'd absolutely, if it's a larger donor base, I mean, I'm assuming they have a little bit more extra tools at their disposal to be able to do it. I agree with Marnie that I'd go deeper into the automation. I'd go into creating those individual personas and identifying, who are their, what are their buying patterns? What are their behavior? What are they interested in? Being able to make it personal. And you can do that in your database, like first name, last name, what do they prefer? I love, and I'm going to tee up Frank here, but, I love, the idea of video leading into a system, and the idea of being personal. I would look at the entire list and say, all right, how many people, or what are the top first names, right? The top 10 first names. I'm assuming there's going to be about 100 that are named Frank in our system. So I'm going to do my own video to a Frank and then put that to every single one of Frank's and John's and Steve's and all the common names to make it, and then to do the one-to-one personal, but at a scale. So a lot of cool things to do there.
Yeah. And beyond that, I mean, it's looking at, like Erik was saying, beyond names, it's similarities. And then if you're reaching out, mail merge is your friend. If you've ever used email mail merge, I used to send 150 emails with the click of a button through email mail merge through Microsoft, and every single email was customized to that. I went through the whole list. I typed out different but it's pretty cool. So Google that if you have Microsoft email mail merge. It's amazing. But really it's like your systems and processes. What do you have in place when these come in? And like I continue to feel like I give $25 gifts all over. I give $100 gifts, not as all over, but I watch to see how people communicate with me. And just really fast, like one of the stories I'll share is donors are raising their hand, and then they're asking to maybe be engaged with. Don't overwhelm them. I've given first-time gifts and I got packets of information. All I needed was a simple thanks and just like, we got your money. I didn't need all of that. I just needed to be recognized. And so it doesn't have to be complex. when you're looking at these segmentations, but look for similarities as well.
Love that. And to your point about the mail merge tags, depending on your CRM system with those emails, you can adopt those smart tags, making sure that first name is in there. So instead of like, hi supporter, hi friend, hi generic statement, their first name will auto-populate. I think one of my favorite ones to use too, particularly if they have given once before, is dropping in that year-to-date tag. Here's how much you've donated to us in the past year. It's this amount. Smart tags like that where you don't have to do the manual research. It's just populating for you immediately. That's a great resonator with donors too. They may not know how much they have contributed to your organization. And it's like, oh, I've given $1,000 in the past year. That's incredible. And speaking of donor journeys, that's a whole other conversation, is celebrating those milestones as well for your donors. Making sure that we recognize and celebrate when they do hit achievements like that. That's incredibly impactful. We have another question here too, which is, I feel this one, by the way, because I remember being a team of one for a fundraiser. I really want to get started, but I'm struggling to get the rest of my team on board. How do you get other team members in your organization to jump on board with donor stewardship and putting a plan into place?
Getting them to thank donors. If you honestly, like if you have your staff just having that conversation, having that one-to-one, that firm handshake, that phone call, whatever it might be, getting your staff to do that. If they do it once or twice, as long as they don't get hung up on, right? They're going to get that, hear the story of the donor, to Marnie's point earlier, and they're going to want to do it again. And they're going to continue to want to do it because generosity begets generosity internally as well as externally.
Yeah, I think getting them involved. I'll just use an example. During COVID, I was at a different organization and we really changed the script. It was doing check-ins on our donors. We weren't calling to ask for money. We were calling to check in and make sure that they were, that they were okay. And we included people outside of fundraising, or the fundraising department, to be a part of that. And then you regroup and what did they learn? And we had one person that said, oh my gosh, that was one of the most impactful things I've ever done, was just to call and check and make sure somebody was okay. Then they start to understand it. But honestly, like this does not work if your fundraising department is in a silo. If your leadership does not understand the importance of stewardship, it's just going to be a struggle. Like everyone has to realize that they are part of the team, and to make this work, everybody has a role. And so kind of share the ball. And when it's in your hands, you got to do, you got to go be you and do your thing, but we need all the others. We need finance, we need program, we need fundraising, we need our data people. Everybody has to work together.
When a lot of it goes back to relationship as well. Like if we're talking about major donors or mid-level or wherever, it's normally just one person who's communicating with them. But the issue is that one person, if they go, what happens in the relationship? And the most difficult, challenging thing is major gifts is balancing that personal and professional relationship with the donor. And we have this ability to showcase others who work at the organization, and bringing them along and getting them involved actually shows holistically that they're working with an organization and not an individual. And so when those transitions happen, if they're working with the organization, the impact on the donor, on the giving and the relationship is much less when the relationship is with the organization. And so how can you get those people introduced to them? How can they be introduced to other team members? Because people get territorial as a gift officer about, hey, that's my donor. It's not, it's the organization's donor. Everyone should be thanking them, and they should hear from different people, because, God forbid something happens. Now you have them as an organization relation, not an individual.
I hated that term, my donor. I mean, because it's like, I think of it as like, remember Finding Nemo, when you have that flock of seagulls and everything else is out there, and like there's a fish above it and they're like, mine, 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 mine. Like all those seagulls are different departments inside our organization. They're the annual fund department, the plan giving department, the marketing, all the different departments. And like all the donor sees is a flock of seagulls. And to your point, Frank, that's our organization. Relationships matter, and we all need to be doing that. But I hate that term, my donor.
Awesome. Well, Marne, Erik, Frank, this was an amazing panel. Thank you all very, very much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your insights and your knowledge with everyone today. It's been truly a pleasure to be a part of this, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it as well. If you ever would like to learn more, get in touch, want to speak a little bit more, or just kind of hear some more experiential stories, here is Marnie's information. We also, she is just a delight. I have loved working with her, but you are more than welcome to contact her in these variety of ways. Of course, there is the website as well for United Way of Central Illinois, as well as Frank's information. And he is fancy. He gets a little QR code with his LinkedIn. And you can simply scan that, but Allie is also on standby, dropping in the links to LinkedIn as well, if you prefer that method as well. I believe we also have some really great resources from Gravyty too. And yes, Katie, it is a dino inside of the QR code, which I think just makes it a little extra special. Lastly, for Erik and myself, if you ever want to have a conversation, I love talking to our customers or those that aren't even our customers, just to hear how things are going in the nonprofit world. Still very much invested in that environment, but just want to hear how you're doing and how we can help, how we can continue to build a better product for fundraisers. Drop me a line anytime. Always happy to chat. And I know the same goes for Erik. If you want to get to know Mr. Pittsburgh even better than just the amazing fundraiser or previous fundraiser that he used to be, you can also email him there as well. And I know
Awkward that I'm wearing the same outfit in my headshot, by the way. Weird. So weird.
I didn't even notice. But yes, if you want to get in touch with any of our fine panelists today, please feel free to reach out through the variety of mediums. But thank you all deeply so much for being here, and we will catch you on the next webinar. Thank you all.